Okay, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Sadika Williams, and I am the VP of External Affairs and General Counsel for the Safer Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Expungement panel. I am so honored to moderate this panel on a very important issue that everyone has paid close attention to and fought for the inclusion in the Cannabis Act, expungement. I am personally proud that Illinois chose to include records relief in this bill to deal with the full impact that cannabis prohibition had on our communities. It would have been a great injustice to allow others to profit from this new legal market without addressing the harm that has happened to the people in Illinois, especially brown and black communities. We are extremely fortunate to have with us today panelists that work with organizations and who are experts when it comes to expungement and records relief. Before we hear from the panel, first we're going to have an overview of the expungement provisions, and Christina Kalpa, who is with is a policy advisor at the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, where she focuses on criminal justice reform, policy for diversion, mental health, and restorative justice, will be joining us, along with Alicia Tate, who is the Director of Organizational Strategy and Development for Cabrini Green Legal Aid, which works to remove barriers for individuals, families, and communities affected by the criminal justice system statewide.
Okay. So let's walk them through. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Hi, everybody. Hello. How we doing? Great. You just hanging in there. Just a day of weed, huh? Isn't it interesting? Did we really think we'd be sending our Saturdays at government-sponsored events on weed? I sure didn't. So it's an interesting time we live in, isn't it? So we're going to walk you through just what the provisions are around records relief and expungement, and then we'll have some discussion, as our wonderful moderator said, and we'll have lots of time for your questions, okay? So the first thing is, I just want to make sure people understand part of what makes Illinois' law so different from other states is that we have three huge buckets around social equity in our cannabis law. Other states do not have this. The expungement and the criminal records relief is one of the major things, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this panel. Some of you probably went to the panel on the social equity for the businesses. How do you get into the business? That's another area where they really have taken steps to make sure that people of color, folks in poor communities, folks who've been incarcerated are not cut out of the business. Okay, and then the third area is the grants, the R3 grants that will go back out to communities. 25% of the dollars that come into the state from the cannabis industry will be granted back out into communities. So there's three big ways that the Illinois law is different from other states. Am I making sense? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to focus on just the criminal stuff here today, the expungement stuff and the records relief in this panel. So let's see, why don't you go to the first slide? Okay, so why don't you explain?
Great. So one of the biggest things about this expungement law, as Alicia said, is this expungement provision. I think it's really important to recognize that we change laws all the time. We make things that were formerly illegal legal, but we almost never, and in Illinois, I don't know that we have ever gone back and said, we're going to make this right for the people who were previously wronged by this. And so this is special in Illinois because in Illinois, first of all, convictions can usually only be sealed. And what that means is it's hidden from view from the public, but law enforcement agencies, prosecutors can still see those records. And so as we've said over and over in this process, these low-level cannabis convictions are often gateway convictions. They're things that tend to pile up and lead to greater things and are indicators of frequency of contact with the criminal justice system. And so we know that this isn't necessarily relief for everyone, and it's not the only thing on most people's records, but it is a great place to start, and it will impact a ton of people. And so the fact that these convictions are going to be expunged and not just sealed means that they will be entirely removed from individuals' records. So law enforcement cannot see them, whereas if individuals were to go through that traditional process, law enforcement agencies could still see it. In Michigan, they were doing a study right around the time that we were drafting all of this legislation that found that in Michigan, less than 7% of people eligible for relief receive it. And their expungement laws are a lot more lax than here in Illinois. And so it was important here for us to do this in a way where individuals didn't have to do it on their own time and dime, because only those 7% of people were actually able to access it, because the process is lengthy and costly. And so we're really excited to be talking with you about this here today, and excited about what this bill holds. You got it? Okay, great. So that piece that we really honed in on here in Cook County is the efficiency and equitable piece. Knowing that so few people actually access conviction relief, it was really important to us that we make this happen for the largest number of people in the broadest form of relief possible, and as quickly as we could get it done. The process here in Illinois is all paper-based. And so the first thing that we did as individuals invested in this process was sit down and think through what are the absolute minimum things that need to happen from a legal perspective and from a records management perspective to get this done, and how can we turn that on its head and government, as government agencies, innovate, which is something that we often don't do enough of, perhaps, to figure out how we can make this process better for individuals. So to give you a sense of where we came from and where we're going on this expungement provision, currently in Cook County, we handle about 1,600 petitions for sealing or expungement a month. That may not seem like a lot, given the numbers you've heard around this cannabis provision. And on December 11th, we handled 1,012 of those first convictions with the state's attorney, Kim Fox, setting up those motions to vacate in an hour. The clerk's office was then able to remove all of those convictions from their system in 10 minutes. So we're really taking steps, and we're doing this slowly, and we started with a small number of convictions because we wanted to make sure that the system that we were designing and working to innovate was set up for success. And so we didn't want to send all of the eligible convictions through right away. We wanted to make sure that with these first 1,000, everyone knew their steps in this dance that we're all playing together, and that we got it right. And so the next step is notification, and the deadline for that is a week from Monday, and that's the last step in that first 1,000 being complete. And then we're going to be working to ramp up and speed up to see how quickly and efficiently we can get this done for residents of Cook County.
And can I just add, because Cabrini Green Legal Aid, my organization, we run a help desk in the Daly Center that has been running for, 10 years at least, where we help people process this paperwork. And it's really that little line at the bottom that it takes up to a year. That's really important. That even when you have all the paperwork done properly and everything is, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, you'll be waiting for a year, most cases, in Cook for a judge to sign that paperwork. And that's if you have a case where there's no objections raised to your case. So it is very lengthy, and it's very important that people, get the process in motion as soon as possible. So that is why it is pretty extraordinary that State's Attorney Fox used her power. She said, I'm not going to wait for the state to do this. And we'll get to the timeline in a minute for what the state is saying it's going to do with these. But she went ahead, and the majority of these cases are in Cook County statewide, so she's using her power as a state's attorney to do that. Now, we have 102 counties in Illinois, right? So we got 101 other states' attorneys, and we don't know what they will do. We have no idea what they will do. But it's significant that this is what is happening in Cook County. There we go. Okay, so now, the state's attorney's office and my office, we talk about it in a few different ways. How we talk about it with clients is that there are three big ways that you can get criminal records relief under the new law, okay? The first is non-convictions, and those are all the technical terms you see there in the box. But basically, Illinois State Police is going to take all the non-convictions and do like a big data batch thing and get all of those expunged, okay? And that is something like, the whole umbrella for this is like about 500,000 records affecting more than 300,000 people in the state. So about 2/3 of that falls under this non-convictions. Because a lot of people get charged with cannabis. This is all minor cannabis. This is under 30 grams. A lot of people got charged with that, okay? So that's one bucket. The second bucket is the convictions. Now the convictions, will be eligible for pardon. How many of you saw Governor Pritzker, come out with the press conference with the 11,000 pardons that he issued, right? That's what that bucket is. Those are pardons, okay? So now we can go to the next. And all of this is minor cannabis. This is under 30 grams. It's different for if you have up to 300 grams, that's a whole different story, okay? All right, so this is some of the technical stuff. Now this describes the different charges, and this is the other way you can do this, is the third way, a motion to vacate and expunge. That's a new way to get this off of your record. Now, state's attorneys have the power to issue those motions themselves. That's what we're talking about State's Attorney Fox is doing. You with me so far? Okay. But you can do that as an individual also. You can file a motion to vacate and expunge. You may not want to wait for the state or the state's attorney to do that. You have that right as an individual, and if you would like to do that, you can come to our help desk at the Daily Center, or we run it at the Markham Courthouse on Wednesdays, but the Daily Center every day. Am I making sense so far? Okay, we'll get into more detailed questions, but I wanted you to see that then, look, I am not an attorney, so these are all the technical terms for your case. You would have to look at your rap sheet and see which of these categories your cannabis charge falls under. And this is the pathway for you to get released. So like the second from the bottom, the order for immediate release, people who are in prison, who are incarcerated for these minor charges, should be released under this new law. That is one of the questions we have, though, is what is happening with those people? We're not actually certain. What is happening? Are they being released? When will they be released? Okay? But this is just an overview for what you can do, how to do it, and which individuals or entities have the power to do it. And now this is pardons. This is the flow chart for the different entities that deal with a pardon. So it has to initiate from state police gives the names to the prisoner review board. If they put them forward, it goes to the governor. The attorney general has to approve. A judge signs the order, and then the clerk sends you notice that you've been pardoned. It's a lot of cooks in this kitchen. It's many layers and levels of government, state, county, and local, dealing with all of these entities, okay? But those are those three pathways you have. You know, you get automatic expungements, there's pardons, and there's motions to vacate and expunge, okay?
And so that automatic process is happening for everyone with a conviction or an arrest or anything that didn't result in a conviction, those non-convictions, that special probation, things like that. Everything under 30 grams is happening automatically. The only exception to that,
County.
statewide.
sorry.
For the under 30 grams. So the important thing to know there, or the only exception there, is if you were convicted of a violent crime at the same time that you got that conviction for 30 grams or less. So that second slide that we showed with all of the different flow charts and ways that things can move through the system are those cases that might have fallen out of that automatic process with that 30 grams or less. For some reason, the Illinois State Police or the Prisoner Review Board didn't recommend it for a pardon, or it wasn't automatically, yes, this slide. Or if it's more than 30 grams. So you'll notice that 30 to 500 grams are still eligible for relief, straight possession, eligible for relief under this legislation. It's just not happening automatically. Right. So there will be a statewide form, a motion to vacate, that we're expecting to come out in the spring, where you can independently file for that relief, and prosecutors are only allowed to object if it doesn't match the eligibility requirements in the legislation. So basically, they're only allowed to object if you filled out the form for a case that wasn't possession of cannabis up to 500 grams.
So you can bring the form to the help desk, and we can help you fill it out so you know you've done it properly. But that's a big deal that it's a statewide form. Finally, we're going to have a form that's not 102 different forms. You know what I'm saying? So that is something in and of itself.
Okay, so we'll jump back a couple of slides. So the vacatur piece that we've decided to pursue here in Cook County, and there have been a couple other state's attorneys who we have been pleasantly surprised are pursuing this as well. You'll notice that there's a few less steps in this sequence, and so we're hopeful that this just makes the process more efficient. So we as the state's attorney's office get the data directly from the Illinois State Police of all of the eligible convictions. We go through that data with our partners, Code for America, in this process, who's a non-profit or not-for-profit, so at no cost to taxpayers or government agencies. They help us generate all of the paperwork in a matter of minutes with their technology to present those motions to a judge, and then we work with the clerk's office, and like we talked about before, to use tech again to eliminate all of those from their systems as quickly as possible, and then we notify individuals that they have been impacted. Great. So this is a flow chart that we've developed that you can, we've got postcards that are out at our table in that main hall, just describing who's eligible and what are the processes and who is going to receive that relief automatically. And so feel free to go and check that out. I think the other thing that I would say, which we'll get to in the next slide. Oh, maybe it's the next.
It's the timing. It's a nice delay on the computer, so we get to just take a breath.
Is these are the deadlines to keep an eye out for statewide. Because we're doing this process a little bit differently here in Cook County, we're hopeful that we're going to beat all of these deadlines by a pretty substantial amount. But the legislation requires that at least those non-convictions must be dealt with by the dates you see on this slide. So if your non-conviction or conviction was before January 1st of 2020, you should see relief by January 1st of 2021.
So what Cabrini Green Legal Aid would advise you to do is do not wait. Don't wait for that. Just come, bring your rap sheet to the Daily Center. I can walk you through, bring your rap sheet. We will walk you through the process and go ahead and get your expungement, get the wheels in motion, because you have a right. That's your right to clear that, get that cleared from your record. So you don't have to wait for this timeline. You can go ahead and start filing now. But it is, again, if you are in Cook County, if these are Cook County charges, it will be a much quicker process than what you see here for minor cannabis, nonviolent offenses.
And it's
We can't take questions yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
and it's again to that point of how many individuals we know miss out on the opportunity to get their records cleared. And so we know there's a lot of people who are invested in making sure that they get the relief that they're eligible for, but there's a much larger number of people who might never actually go through the process. And so the deadlines are to make sure that we're keeping things equitable and making sure that everyone that's eligible for that relief is getting it in a timely fashion. So the most important thing and the toughest nut to crack across all states that have pursued this, which I should say is really only two, us and California. And California did this outside of their legalization of cannabis, and so it came after the fact, and so they've had a little bit more ad hoc process. But no one has really figured out how to best notify individuals that they have been impacted by relief. And so that first batch of data that the Cook County State's Attorney's Office received from the Illinois State Police included 18,000 standalone convictions for marijuana offenses under 30 grams, dating back to 1954. And so the clerk's office is required under the legislation to mail notice, which includes a copy of your certified order of disposition, which is really helpful if you are pursuing some other legal options for you to say this is what happened to me. But they have to email you that certified copy of disposition and that order of expungement so that you can prove, or if you're applying for an equity license, say like, hey, this was expunged, but it did happen to me. They have to mail it to your last known address. That person from 1954 is probably not living at the same place that they were living at in 1954. So the clerk of the Circuit Court of Cook County has created a form that you can submit via email or fax on their website, this cookcountyclerkofcourt.org/address, and you can also opt in to email notification so that when your conviction is up and has been granted relief, you are notified. We know that we're probably not, again, going to get everyone, but if you are someone that's looking to go through this process automatically and wanting to get updates on your case, this is the best way to do it.
The last thing I would just say, too, is that in our experience, we see 6,000 to 7,000 people a year at our help desk looking for criminal records relief, and most people don't just have a minor cannabis charge on their records. There are a variety of other things, a variety of other charges and dispositions, and we advise people to seek support with this. Come and talk to our pro bono lawyers, our staff. Legal Aid Chicago also does expungement work. Regina will talk about that. But you don't have to navigate this alone. There are legal advocates out here who can support you. If you have any questions at all, we are happy to help, because our goal is to get as many people relief as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna get to, we'll get to the question.
And then on the last slide?
What's the last slide? Here's our contact information. So, well, that's our names. Our emails aren't on here. I have business we can give you business cards. You can let us know if you'd like to contact us. Or you can go to cgla.net. Our website has all of this information, and including like, how do I get help? And it will walk you through. I know Legal Aid Chicago is similar. I know the state's attorney's office. So all of our websites, we've really been trying to make it easy for people to know where to go for help.
And I know everybody's anxious to ask questions. We are going to have most of our time for questions. We just have a couple questions for the panelists before we jump to that portion. Before we start asking questions for the panelists, I do want to introduce our last panelist. Regina Hernandez is a staff attorney with Legal Aid Chicago's Volunteer Services Unit, where she recruits and manages volunteers to extend their services to as many clients as possible. But she also leads their community legal clinics, which I would like for you to talk about, especially, and then I'm going to extend that question to the rest of you as well, given kind of the deadlines you're up against for that January 1st, 2021, I believe. What are your plans, and what are the services you're offering? And Alicia, I think you covered that, but if you have anything else to add. But I'm going to start with Regina.
Good afternoon, everyone. My colleagues over here really did an amazing job. I've seen them do this presentation before, and for a very complicated piece of legislation, that is the best summary you're going to get. So again, my name is Regina Hernandez. I'm a staff attorney at Legal Aid Chicago, and I think what Alicia said is right on in terms of not waiting and investigating your record now. I think that a lot of people, because of the way that criminal records relief has been made available in the past, have faced barrier after barrier. And I know that even prior to like 2017, when there was a big expansion on what could be sealed, it was a big deal, and people who previously thought that they didn't have any hope felt like there was a chance, and there are people willing to help. As far as Legal Aid Chicago goes, part of what I do is I partner with firms who have significantly more resources than I do, and through those partnerships, we're able to do pro bono clinics. And this can be on a variety of topics. It just so happens that the issue that we've identified in the last year that we should be spending the most of, my time on has been criminal records relief. So the way that the process goes in terms of services at Legal Aid Chicago is that we do have an adult expungement helpline that you can call, and you leave a message. We have a voicemail recording on there saying, hey, before you leave a message, like, go get your rap sheet, because no matter where you go get help, that is the first step. And even if you are unsure about, did that arrest actually result in a record, it's worth looking into. It is worth seeing what information is out there about you. And even for those non-convictions, it's something that you should really consider in terms of who's seeing them and what options are available for you, and how this could potentially come up in the future. And for us, if you call that number and you leave a message saying, hey, Regina, I got my rap sheet, like, I'm ready for you, then we, through these pro bono clinics that we're now having every month, we take about maybe 25 clients per clinic. It depends on how many volunteers we can get. And though it's a smaller number than CGLA, and Lord knows how he managed that help desk at the Daily Center, but for us, our goal is full representation. So what I do is I'm kind of the entry point into any kind of representation. I review your record. I look at any and all options that are available for you. So even outside of expungement and sealing, I recognize that there's other options for often really complicated records, which include things like certificates of good conduct, healthcare waivers if you would like to work in the healthcare industry and are facing a disqualifying conviction. As my colleague said, often those small marijuana charges are not the only thing that end up following a person around and can really start a relationship with the police.
Regina,
Yes.
for rap sheets, where and how do they go about getting those?
So what my top recommendation has been, and they're used to us sending so many people over there now, is CPD headquarters located at 35th and Michigan. You can get your statewide police report, and you should ask for both, your statewide police report and Chicago Police Department rap sheet for $16. You do have to show up prior to, I believe, 12:30 to get initially fingerprinted, and then you would pick up your results usually in about a week. It depends on how busy they are at that time. But investigating your records, first steps, and I know at least with our wonderful partners at CGLA, who we also run a juvenile expungement help desk with at the juvenile court, we're staying busy and we are willing and ready to help.
And you'll notice Regina said that $16, and a lot of you had some thoughts on that. So when we
I
talk
do too.
about, when we talk about expungement being costly and timely, that's the first entry point into this process. And so there are lots of nonprofit organizations out there crowd fundraising around this. Chicago Normal is one of them, specifically trying to give people financial assistance so that we can remove some of those barriers for individuals who are interested in pursuing this outside of the automatic process.
And I do think it's worth mentioning really quick, since we're on the topic of cost, is regardless of whether or not you get help at one of our agencies or another agency, it's important to know that if you do qualify, there are fee waivers to waive the filing costs associated with filing expungement and sealing petitions. For anyone who qualifies for Legal Aid Chicago services, so typically that's someone who's about under 150% of the federal poverty line, then we are saying, hey, we're going to represent you, and we have our own version of a fee waiver essentially that says we're vouching for this person, that they qualify for our free civil legal services, so all costs should be waived. And so that's something that I consider a huge benefit that I'm able to do for my clients is filing. It's called a CLSP. It's just a civil legal service provider saying, yeah, give this person free services, thanks. And the other thing I'll mention is that the wait times for the general expungement process do vary. There are 6 municipal districts in Cook County, and each of them is a separate court that you need to file in depending on where you got arrested. So if you got arrested in Maywood, you got to file in the Maywood courthouse. And for the suburban districts, which are districts 2 through 6, they do have, at least right now, a significantly shorter process for this. So even if you're going to be waiting a year for the Chicago arrest to come off, there are some better options in terms of the suburban districts. So again, it can be incredibly difficult and disheartening to hear how long this process takes. I personally consider it to be another barrier, and just know that there are options and things that we can do in the meantime.
Alicia, do you have anything, Christina, to add?
Just
Okay.
let us get right into questions.
Okay, and another question is, how will this new law affect people? What concerns have you had, if any, regarding that?
Well, I mean, we have a few concerns. Cabrini Green Legal Aid, in addition to the criminal records relief work we do a lot of policy advocacy work for systems change, because we recognize we can't personally assist everybody in the state of Illinois. We have lawyers, we have social workers, we work with clients, but we work for systems change, and the folks who advise us on that are folks who've been in the system, who have direct experience in the criminal justice system. And they have raised a lot of concerns about things like, if I go into a dispensary, they're gonna scan my ID. What are they gonna do with that information? And we don't know the answers to these questions, right? Some of the data coming out of Colorado has shown that young people in states that legalize for adults, young people get shaken down harder. That happens sometimes. And the racial disparities of who is ticketed for violations does not change when there's legalization. That's what the data show. So in Chicago, for instance, police are saying they're not going to arrest people for violations of the state law, but they will ticket you. So if you're walking down the street smoking, you'll get a $50 ticket, I think, for the first violation and $100 for the second violation. Now, who will get those tickets? Where will they be, giving those? I don't know. But these are questions that come up. in addition to all of the questions people have just about, well, how are we really going to benefit from this economically? How will we really get these jobs? These are all big unknowns. And the state, authors of the law have really tried to put things in place to address them. But these are some of the concerns that we're hearing. And also, where will the dispensaries be located? How will that change the character of a community or a neighborhood? I don't think we know yet.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remind ourselves that we are the first state to ever do this legislatively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so every other state that's come before us is not necessarily a good example of what's going to happen here in Illinois, because we had 4+ years of legislators being thoughtful about this process, and we are 4 weeks in. So we have to be a little bit patient to think about giving us space and time to actually let that work and all of that thoughtfulness and consideration that went into the legislation actually play out. And so, yes, we're 4 weeks in and we still have a lot of questions, and everyone's still in the room trying to get those answers. But a lot of it is just going to be patience and staying tuned in and making sure that we're holding each other accountable throughout this process.
Thank you. And one more question, but I would be remiss if I didn't say this, because the organization I work for helps people who are justice involved with employment. Underneath this act, or more like the modification that happened in December, employers are still allowed to have zero tolerance hiring policies. And so people, might think, okay, well, cannabis is legal, I can smoke, or I can do edibles or whatever, but they are still allowed to have a reasonable policy. So if you go into a job, what we're telling our clients at this point is every employer could be different, and you need to be prepared that they could be drug testing for cannabis.
Well, and it's really tricky. So you have to think alcohol, right?
Exactly.
You can't be fired for, well, in most professions, I'll say, you can't be fired if you go have some drinks on the weekend. But you could be fired if you show up to work drunk, right?
Correct.
Okay, cannabis is legal now. It's similar.
Exactly.
It's similar. So drug testing, and it's also a totally different kind of technology for drug testing that is not really yet developed.
Correct.
Because cannabis can stay in your system for weeks.
Correct.
Weeks and weeks. So I think there's going to be a lot of HR attorneys that will make a lot of money. But I think, the point is well taken for people to really make sure they understand what are the workplace policies. Because they can terminate you if they think that you are high at work. But how they will determine that will be very subjective.
Right.
It will be very subjective. So, yes, people need to know it's not wild, wild west, we can just do whatever we want. No, think alcohol. Similar. You can't have it in your car. You can't be smoking while you driving in your car. No.
Exactly.
It's just kind of common sense in some ways.
Exactly.
So,
And it's pre-employment and random, so that's still allowed. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Very good
One
point.
last question. What are some other options people can explore outside of the automatic expungement process?
well, we talked about, a number of them. Regina, did you want to say again what some of the options are?
So I do think that in general, thinking about the average person who might have any kind of cannabis-related arrest or conviction on their record, it's important to try to address any kind of situation that you're currently in and what your goals are. And so depending on what your goals are, and that's usually one of the first things that I ask a client is, what's happening right now? What do you want to happen 5 years from now? What are you thinking that this is going to help you overcome? And I think that's a really crucial question, because then it has me formulate a game plan. If I'm thinking like, okay, this person has a pretty serious conviction and it's a Chicago conviction, I can kind of anticipate when I might get an objection in a lot of different cases and know that this person might be waiting a year. So I think about in the meantime, what is this person trying to do? Are they trying to apply for school? What's going on? I have a client right now who is trying to become a nurse, and she's trying to get that initial experience, which I think is something that doesn't get talked about a lot when somebody's in school and they're trying to get those first couple jobs, those internships, things like that, and just build that resume, and are facing these things. And so this client in particular, she only had one conviction on her entire record, but it was a disqualifying conviction. based on what the IDFPR, which is the regulatory body that manages all the different licenses, and she needed to do a healthcare waiver. And so that's what I'm helping her with right now. But because she has a deadline to get into a particular experiential class that will get her in front of patients right away, I have to weigh the options. Like, okay, it qualifies for expungement and sealing, but in the meantime, the quicker thing is going to be to do this healthcare waiver. And then afterwards, if I had a little bit more time or the timeline was different, once something is expunged and sealed, generally, for most purposes, it cannot be considered. Now, there are exceptions to that, and that's something that you absolutely need to discuss with somebody so that you're not just blindly thinking that, okay, expungement and sealing is the thing that's going to solve all my problems. We need to better understand and put the message out there that there are still a lot of exceptions to that. I always cite the most common one is like Chicago Public Schools. There is a public interest in knowing what even some sealed convictions are coming into a school building when you're working with children. And so it's important to really understand what each individual arrest means. And there are additional options other than the healthcare waiver. Like I mentioned before, there's a certificate of good conduct, and there's some more obscure forms of relief, like a certificate for eligibility of expungement for things that otherwise might not qualify for expungement, and a certificate of eligibility for sealing, which does the same thing for a conviction that might not be subject to sealing. So I like to look at the whole rap sheet. I like to look at every record and come up with a game plan depending on what your plans are. So I think it's important to investigate further and consult with somebody as soon as possible if this even potentially qualifies for you, because I know when I used to do all these presentations about what is expungement, what's sealing, especially for a lot of these juvenile arrests, a lot of people were surprised. Like, every time that you are arrested, you create an arrest record that does not necessarily go away automatically. And not everything prior to the age of 18 just disappears like that when you turn 18. And a lot of other misconceptions that I think all of our agencies work very hard to try to correct and try to put that information out there. So
Thank you. Thank
there
you
are
very
options.
much. So we're going to open it up, questions to the audience.
Hang on until she brings you the mic.
Oh, I have one question. You mentioned sealed. So what happened to those records? Do you tear them up or
No, a
what?
sealed record means that the police still can see the record, but that employers, landlords, they cannot see it. But it is still in the police system, right? That's what it means, right? Expungement means it is literally destroyed. Right, so it's a difference. So sealing is generally for when you have a conviction. Expungement is when you have a non-conviction, and anything except for 4 things can be sealed and expunged in the state of Illinois. So virtually every crime can be sealed or expunged. Not sex crimes, not DUIs, and there's a few others, but most
And
everything.
I'll just say for felony convictions that have been sealed, there is a kind of exception there. If an agency or employer is authorized to conduct a fingerprint-based background check, then felony convictions will still appear even after they're sealed. But again, this is for a limited number of different agencies. But
And on cannabis, what was exciting and important about this legislation is that all of those convictions will be expunged. So if it's those eligible cannabis convictions, those are not just sealed, those are fully destroyed, so no one is able to see those any longer.
Thank you. Can we, this woman's been waiting for a while. Thank you.
Hi, and I just want to say kudos to you guys, and it's great that you're doing that with the 30 grams under. Kim Fox came out to a community meeting and she spoke on that, and she said that's something that she's doing automatically, so people have to do nothing, just open their mailbox and they'll see this letter and they're saying that it's been expunged. So my question to you guys is, you're only going back to 2013?
No, we're going all the way back. We're just starting with the most recent cases because, to Regina's point, the thought behind the legislation and why we set those deadlines the way that they are is more recent convictions are still probably causing more harm, and more recent convictions are also easier to find in our systems. That conviction from 1954 that I mentioned is going to take some tracking down in a warehouse somewhere to find that record to actually destroy it. So we're starting with 2013 to present. to address the harm that's maybe still being caused by those convictions, and then we'll be working our way all the way back as far as the records go.
My other question is, you spoke and said that the expungement takes 1 hour. Is that?
A year, 1 year.
No, she said it was one.
Oh,
that
I'm
slide
sorry.
said 1
The
hour
motion's to
also.
vacate, yeah.
So
sorry.
when we did our first batch, so typically the process might take someone over a year who's going through the traditional.
In Chicago, right.
In Chicago, the traditional expungement and sealing, but it took us 1 hour on December 11th to do that first 1,000.
Was that because it was being done by the state's attorney's office?
It was in part because it's being done by the state's attorney's office, but in general because we took an approach to these cannabis conviction expungements and we just turned it all on its head and said, what do we need to do as a system across all the agencies that touch this process, and what can we do to make this more efficient? And so because the legislation said we're going to grant this relief for all of these convictions of 30 grams or less, we were able to do that. It's not something that you'll necessarily see on convictions across the board because there are so many agencies that have the right to look at those petitions for sealing and expungement from a public safety standpoint and say whether or not they're comfortable with that record actually being sealed or expunged.
And they brought in a great third party that's done all this work in California called Code for America that knows how to take government systems and use technology to make things efficient. What a concept, right?
Right.
That'd be nice if we did that with like 3,000 other things in Illinois, I think, eventually.
What floor are you located in the Daily Center?
The 10th floor.
On
You
the
come
10th
to the 10th floor of the Daily Center, and it's in the clerk's office. We have a help desk with our staff and pro bono attorneys right there. And you show us your rap sheet, we will help you fill out the paperwork right then and there. We encourage people to get there early because we can only take the first 20 people per day.
Right.
Okay, so we're there in the mornings, so come at like 8:30 in the morning, okay?
So your Cabrini Green location that's not a location, or it's just called Cabrini?
So
Legal
we're
Aid?
called Cabrini Green Legal Aid because we were founded 46 years ago in Cabrini Green to provide legal aid services for those residents. We are no longer located in that part of the city. You may have noticed those buildings no longer exist also.
True.
But we kept the name because the community and the heritage of the community and our founding was very important to us. We're located downtown now. It just makes our work easier for being centrally located and serving people from all over the region. But we also go all over the state and do summits and outreach, and we have people in Springfield doing stuff. So we're located downtown now. But the help desk is in Daily Center every day, and then in the Markham Courthouse, it is on Wednesdays.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so any future questions, please limit to one, and if we have any more, no problem. They were all good questions, and that was information everybody needed
So
to know.
the mic runners need to pick the people, right?
Right.
Because it's a lot of hands.
Right.
Your experience, how long does it take when you come to the 10th floor?
The help desk, it's going to depend on what's on your rap sheet. If you got 3 things, that's something, but if you got 20, that's going to take longer. So it really varies person to person. And sometimes people, to Regina's point, will also be seeking some additional services, and they may become a client of ours and talk with a social worker, make an appointment to talk with a social worker. So it's very, very case specific. We don't have a cookie cutter approach to this because it's different for every person.
Hi. So
Hi.
in California, if you're currently incarcerated on probation or parole with a conviction that was formerly or cannabis conviction that was formerly a felony and is now a misdemeanor or some sort of a lesser offense, there is a process through which you can petition the court to have your sentence, your conviction amended, and your term of supervision or incarceration reduced, so you get out earlier. Is there a mechanism for that in Illinois?
Well, all the people in prison for minor cannabis are supposed to be released immediately under this new law.
Yeah, so we're still working through, there is a process. The prisoner
But
review board,
to mitigate
to reduce the charges.
okay.
So
I see what you're saying.
With those with the cases that I'm referring to, they are offenses that aren't, right? So there are offenses that are still illegal.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, right? But it is now considered a lesser offense.
California is really different because all the court systems, it's all consolidated in California. Everything works together. So It's not as smooth in Illinois.
But I will say that's why when we had that first slide saying who's eligible for this, you hear people say 30 grams or less. Because in 2016 in Illinois, cannabis possession was defelonized. And so 30 grams used to be the felony threshold. And now it was, until it was legalized, was a misdemeanor threshold. And so by saying it's possession of 30 grams or less for a felony or a misdemeanor, we're able to capture kind of that same population that California was working to assist in that conviction relief, and those same cases are eligible for release from incarceration. Although the number of individuals that are currently incarcerated strictly for a low-level cannabis possession charge is very small.
Very small.
So as you
Very
continue to
small.
have these conversations, and some people are concerned about how many individuals might be released from custody, that number is very small for individuals who are just incarcerated.
But just
on
real
that charge.
quick, I would encourage you to pay attention to what happens in Springfield this year, because there is going to be legislation moving to expand what we call clean slate laws and decriminalizing and doing it retroactively. So one of the sponsors of the cannabis, the Recreational Cannabis Act, Jahan Gordon Booth from, where's she from? Peoria. She is a very strong advocate for exactly what you're saying, because she has a criminal background herself. And so there are
It's
a
been
number
expunged.
of people and
To my
entities
expense.
that are moving this, going to be moving legislation around this. So I would really encourage you to monitor it, stay in touch with your state representatives and senators on it, because it is definitely we are moving in that direction, which is very exciting.
All right. Thank you.
My question is, for the Legal Aid Chicago and for Green Legal Aid, do you guys only provide pro bono services for criminal cannabis-related convictions, or do you provide pro bono services for businesses and other entities as well?
Legal aids really only work with indigent individuals around their needs. It's not for, tends to not be for businesses. Cabrini Green Legal Aid is, I think, one of the only legal aids that focuses exclusively on criminal matters. We do some civil work, but it's all in the context of folks who have criminal backgrounds. That is unusual. Most legal aids do a lot of civil work, a lot more than we do, but that was a strategic decision we made because of what we were seeing in the community and the need. But I think as a business, that's not what legal aids tend to be designed for. I don't know, Regina, if you
No,
would add.
I mean, I think that's absolutely right. And in terms of limited resources that legal assistant agencies have, we have to make some difficult decisions. Legal Aid Chicago, we generally represent in civil legal matters, including children and family, consumer, public benefits. Housing is a huge one, but again, thinking about it from the perspective of who needs help the most, we typically don't represent landlords. And we also do immigrant and workers' rights. And so this expungement project at Legal Aid Chicago is a growing one, and that's because we utilize outside resources to help with a lot of the paperwork. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to fully represent my currently like 150 clients that I have. So with that help to actually take care of the paperwork in this very paper-based system is crucial. And with additional agencies always supporting us and trying to take as many clients as they can as well, we're working together to try to address as much as we can. And for Legal Aid Chicago, at least I can say that in addition to just expungement clinics, we also have general walk-in community clinics where you can typically see me very tired giving advice on a number of different things that I happen to know about. But right now, expungement and criminal records relief in general is a predominant focus, especially because of how these changes are really affecting the population. And we have, again, more options than ever, and we're both keeping busy.
Yeah, and I would say, are you an entrepreneur looking to get into the cannabis space? You're looking, is it a cannabis-focused business? So you need to go to the state. You need to go to the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, IDCEO, because they have dollars available for training and other support for people of color, business owners, entrepreneurs looking to get into the space. So that's your resource, really.
And
That's
I'll-
your starting place.
And I would also encourage you to look at the program book to see who's here today, if there's
Yeah, they
any
did that
concurrent
panel
sessions
upstairs.
coming up after. There's going to be one session ending at the same time as ours. So just like look to see who's speaking in there and then try to network out there, because sometimes the best advice is knowing the people who do it day to day. So I would just encourage you.
But
to-
IDCEO has got to have a table
Yeah.
at the vendor booth too. But they would be your starting point as a business owner. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well,
But they were-
he's got a mic there.
So, back in 2013, my house got raided for 3 grams of weed. Is there anything
Wow.
that can happen for me to get my...
Were you, so you were charged
Yeah, you charged me for manufacturing and attempted delivery.
for 3 grams? Goodness gracious.
Yeah, so, all they did was give me supervision.
Were you convicted? No, you got supervision. Okay,
And you
so
completed it
Regina-
satisfactorily?
Yes.
Okay, so do you have, well, we can't get into the specifics here.
Yeah.
Ethics and all that.
No, we can't give you individual legal advice at this table.
But what I can generally say is that something like supervision, as long as completed satisfactorily, typically means that that is not considered a conviction, and there's the expungement option for you. If you did not complete supervision satisfactorily, then that becomes a conviction, and that is something that you would then need to look towards sealing for.
I never faced any time or anything. Just your side.
Sounds like a basic supervision, and pull your full record and come to one of us. Yeah.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions.
And we will be in the main hall after this as well, if you have individual questions.
Thank you. My question is, if someone had an offense, say, and that was done 5-10 years ago, and it could have been expunged or sealed, but recently picked up another offense, do you have to wait till the second one, or can you go ahead and expunge or seal
there's a
something that's
time.
already, was eligible before the new
You can
offense?
start the process with the earlier.
So the thing that you have to take into consideration when looking at a record as a whole is that for convictions, and this is generally speaking, again, convictions that are eligible for some type of automatic relief or other relief that specifically has to do with cannabis is a whole different thing right now. But when I look at a rap sheet, I go and look at the last conviction and the last sentence, because in Illinois, there is a 3-year wait period to seal convictions, and that clock starts after your last sentence is up. So what that
Last
means,
sentence, so your most recent.
your most recent one. So
That answers the question.
if you've had previous things expunged and sealed, that's kind of beside the point. We're looking at what's currently still active on your rap sheet. And let's say you had some conviction in 1990, and I see this all the time. And then you happen to pick up some kind of, minor other drug offense, and you were given probation. We have to wait until that probation period is up to file to seal any other convictions on your record. Expungement is different. They're considered kind of separate and apart from that. But you should also consider that we typically won't touch somebody's record if they have any open cases as well.
So if a person completes an educational training program, that wait time is waived?
Yes, and that's actually, I had a difficult conversation with a client who said, I wish my attorney at the time had told me that all I had to do was go get some kind of career certificate while I was on probation, because there is an exception. If you are serving your sentence or an aftercare release or parole, if you earn some type of vocational certificate, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, anything generally that's a career advancement, you actually waive that wait period of 3 years. So as soon as your probation is up, as soon as your sentence is up, if you earned that degree or certificate during your sentence or parole, then you can still file right away.
And that includes a GED, right?
Oh, yeah.
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 I was just curious about when you go to get your record from the police station, why is it that you have to
So typically there's something that you'll see on a rap sheet called an IR number. This IR number is essentially your fingerprint ID. You have to think about everywhere that a record is. And I look at everything, and I am gonna need better glasses soon because I take a look at your CPD rap sheet, your Illinois State Police report, and then I always do a cross-reference with what information is in the clerk system. And the problem is that records are inconsistent in all these places, especially the older that the record is. So, you know, I've had clients where even their IR number was one number off and it got associated with somebody else. So we have to really be careful and comb through these details as much as possible. And the fingerprinting is the most reliable thing to pick up any known aliases, or if a cop just didn't listen to what your name was, or I have one client who refused to give his name and they put his name down as refuse. And so, but that fingerprint is the unique identifier. And so it's not just gonna pick up what's coming under Joe Smith, it's gonna come up under any numerous spellings, again, theoretically, because those older cases are a hot mess, and sometimes it's just like 00000, and like, this is where the records research comes in, and I dig through these and try to be very careful. But in a nutshell, fingerprinting is one of the more reliable indicators to find everything that's on you.
And it also protects you as you're asking for your rap sheet, for them to be able to verify that you are actually this person whose IR number is associated with this, so that your record isn't given to anyone else and that you don't receive someone else's record.
Let me just, I know we're closing up, but I think that it's really great to hear that question. It's really great for us to get feedback on where are things concerning, where is the process too expensive, where is it too arduous, where is it, too confusing, because that then gives us information that we can use to advocate for changes in how things are done. Like, it is not okay that you have to go to Chicago Police Headquarters to get your rap sheet, that is the only place you can go. That is not a good idea, right? I think we all would agree. And we are concerned with how all these automatic expungements, all this, we don't know how this will affect the court system in Chicago in particular. It's already taking a year. So we're gonna have hundreds of thousands of more working their way through the courts. What will, I don't know how those orders will all get signed and mailed out to people, and when we'll have a new clerk of courts next year, So anyway, we need your feedback, we need your input, we need you to tell our organizations and our leaders what is really happening out there on the ground so that we can be better advocates. So please stay in touch with us and share your feedback. I have my business cards here, you can, contact us, but it'll help us make sure this law gets applied equitably and we can make the system work better for everyone, okay?
Thank you, everyone.
I just have a couple of announcements. So panel 5, which is I Want to Work in the Industry, is going to be on the main stage in the main hall.